Hello YouTube. Today we're talking about something that I've seen pop up in other people's comments, and I've watched videos talking about it, but to me it's a subject that is not discussed enough. And the subject is, can variations of the main lifts impact your form? Meaning, can you damage your ability to perform a lift properly for your own needs if you modify the way you do it through variations? So let's start with actual variations of lifts. For example, is doing a deficit deadlift going to impact your form on the conventional deadlift? I think that it will, but that in that sense, or rather with those lifts, it will only be beneficial, meaning that since a lot of people have trouble getting leg drive in the deadlift and they don't know how to push with their legs as they deadlift, it can become something that's going to teach you how to properly push and how to properly hip hinge and get all leg activation. That being said, on the flip side, for people like me who have excellent leg drive on the deadlift but have a tendency to use a lot of quads, doing those lifts is not necessary. And that comes down to being an intermediate and knowing what your body needs. For people like me, we do not need to pull from a deficit. Why? Because unless there is another hidden benefit in that style variation of the deadlift, we're just going to reinforce a habit that is already very strong in us. People like me need to do more hip hinge types, or they need to do more deadlifts, period. One exception for me is the snatch grip deadlift. The snatch grip deadlift is going to involve more quads, but for me, it also gives me such good development in my upper back that it's a trade-off I'm willing to make. Another example of variation that I think is more relevant to the question is the stiff leg deadlift. Is doing stiff leg deadlift something that can impact your form on the deadlift? I think so. I think it can transpire. It can become something of a bad habit. And the funny thing about that lift and that combination of lifts is that a lot of people don't realize it, but what they think is a deadlift is actually a stiff leg deadlift. They pull with not enough knee flexion and the bar is too far ahead of them. That's when you see those people who deadlift with their back parallel to the floor and they are somehow convinced that it's proper form. And they get not irate, but they get flustered if you challenge the fact that it's not proper form. And even though, depending on your leverages and proportions, your form is going to look different, having your torso parallel to the floor on a deadlift, not a pull, on a deadlift, is never proper form. It's not possible. You need to have a certain level of neutral back and of torso angle going on into the lift before you pull. It's different for Olympic weightlifters when they go for a clean. It's a different setup. So that's sort of the introduction to the topic I think most people worry about. And it can also be that same example I used can be replicated for every lift. I think that certain variations are going to teach certain lifters how to properly perform the lift. For example, something that I really like with squats is doing pose squats, because a lot of people tend to shoot their hips back when they come out of the hole. And doing pose squats with lower weight can help you correct that. It can also help you correct the knee valgus because it's easier to control the angle of the knee with lower weight. And the examples are multiple on that. Same for the bench. There are certain variations of the bench that are strictly more conducive to improving form on the actual bench press. And of course, pose bench is one of the best in my opinion. Now, what would be variations of these lifts that can lead to form breakdown on the main lift? Well, you could argue, if I apply the same logic that I applied for the deadlift, that front squats can potentially modify your form on the back squat. But again, I think for most people it's going to be more of a benefit because front squats force you to stay more upright. They create a lot of rigidity in the core. and they also teach you how to push with your legs and to not let your thoracic spine round. So I think it's going to be a benefit. Now, one variation that is not technically a variation, but it's more of an accessory lift that I had in mind when I made that video is the good morning. Is doing good mornings eventually going to lead to you doing good mornings with your back squats, which is something that is quite common? I think that it absolutely will. I think that if you decide to completely stop doing back squats and you replace them 100% by good mornings, you're going to see, once you go back into doing back squats, that your form suffers because your body got used to the pattern. That being said, there's a very easy way to go around it, and it's to do both. So you replace one session of squats by good mornings, because a lot of people say that getting their good morning up helps their back squat get up, and this is the case for me. Which means that you get more strength and you can put in more volume and you get bigger muscles through hypertrophy. The issue, as I said, is trying to completely replace it, because the good morning squat is a very common form mistake. And to tie it up with something that a lot of people don't like to hear, I think the same can be said for box squats. People who think that they can do cycles of box squats and then go back to their normal regular back squats and have perfect form are mistaken, because what a lot of people do with the box squat is they sit the hips back too much, they rock on the box, and then they get back up. And when they get back up, because they sit and sit back and then rock forward, they good morning the weight up. And because they have something to push off from, they get stronger out of it, because they learn how to use the box as a tool to basically, as a contact with the glutes to push, but it doesn't help with their forms. So people who advise box squats for people who have too much thoracic rounding on the back squat, I think, are mistaken. You can apply both, but you need to keep in mind that it might not be conducive to perfect form on the back squats. And I think there are a lot of examples of other lifts that work the same way, but you have to keep in mind that it also comes down to your own individual weakness as a lifter. We all have certain areas of the compound movements where we're extremely strong at, and it can become easy to focus too much on them, because of course we like being strong, and the same can be said for muscle strength. For me, deficit deadlifts, stiff leg deadlifts, I'm very strong at these. So because anything that is going to require me to use more leg drive and more lower back on any pull from the floor is a strength of mine, and it will become very easy to just focus on them and get stronger. But that's not what I need. What I personally need is more top portion of the deadlift lifts, and that's what I need to focus on, so that's what I'm doing. And the same can be said for the bench and for the squats. You need to focus on your weak points, whether you're a powerlifter or a bodybuilder, because you need to bring them up. So that's pretty much my opinion on whether or not variations of the main lifts can affect your form. Yes, it absolutely can, but if you keep working on the form of the main lift and you don't put it on the side, thinking that the variation or accessory is going to cure it, you should be good. There's not going to be form deterioration to the point that it's not fixable anymore. I don't think that's possible. Thank you for watching. If you have an example in your mind of a variation of a lift that for you is conducive to better form or worse form, let me know. I would be very interested to hear that. Have a good day.